Welcome back to another episode of Two in the Hand, folks. Thank you as ever for joining us. This week, we've really stepped it up a notch and we welcome Mr. David Lindo, aka the Urban Birder, to our show. Okay, guys, so as I said there, we are very, very lucky to have Mr. David Lindo. He is a very, very big step up for us in terms of his professionalism. Dave has been in the public eye as regards birding for a long, long time. He's been on Spring Watch. He's done so much for birding and has so much more experience than any of us. So, as I said, it's a big step up for us, and we are very, very grateful to have him here joining us this week. I'm going to speak for everybody and say thank you very much, David. It's really, really appreciated. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you for the invitation, John. I'm glad to be here.
Not at all. So, as ever, what we usually do is we just kind of have a little bit of a script of a certain number of questions. And what we do is we tear in straight away and ask you them, if that's all right. So we will begin. We'll go with number one. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, David, your background, your career, and also things like how you got into birding and how long you've been birding and stuff like that?
Okay, well, I'm going to go in reverse and say that I've been interested in birds and wildlife since before I was born. I think in a previous life I was a puma, and I used to attack animals, obviously, to eat. And then one day I jumped after a bird and I missed it, and it flew off. And I was thinking, that's amazing. It looks beautiful. So I became a birding puma, which led to my demise because I didn't eat anymore. And just before I died, I thought, it would be interesting to take this on. This is kind of interesting thing I've got going on here. And luckily, I was born as a human in Northwest London. So basically, I had this innate interest from birth, really, and no one around me, my parents, no one, friends, their friends, no one had this interest at all. And it started off initially with invertebrates. So I lived in Wembley, a stone's throw from Wembley Stadium. I think Brian might know it quite well. Basically, I started sort of looking at insects and invertebrates. I didn't know what I was looking at. And then I noticed that birds were feeding on them. And again, I had no clue as to what I was looking at. So I called them as I saw them. Small birds, sparrows or baby birds, starlings, mummy birds, blackbirds, daddy birds, all that sort of stuff. And then when I was 7, I came across a book. And this book, I can see if I can hold it in front of me. It's one that's well known to a lot of people.
Oh, yeah.
I found it in the library. And I couldn't believe the number of birds species in this. It was incredible. And I read this book inside out, back to front, sideways, upside down. By the age of 8, I was a walking encyclopedia on the birds of Britain, Europe, Middle East, North Africa. And this is the very copy I took from the library. I did try to return it, but the library's closed down. So I'm just keeping it until they build a new one. But that was it. By the time I was 8, I was really a total and utter sort of, walking, but then I hardly seen any of birds at all, actually. So I devised a plan with some friends when I was 8 to go to London Zoo. And we got to the zoo, and unfortunately we had a problem, which was none of us had any money. So we couldn't get in. So there was a hole, because if you know London Zoo, it kind of butts onto Regent's Park, and there was a hole in the fence near the lion's cage, which was quite exciting. So we went through the hole in the fence, and my mates were celebrating, but I went straight to the bird section with my book, and I was looking at stone curlews and oyster catchers. I remember vividly actually thinking, if I can recognize that now, then when I see it for real, it'd be like meeting old friends. So that was my strategy. So fast forward, basically, I've been doing what I'm doing now, which is a broadcaster, writer, give talks, educator, all sorts of stuff really for the last 14 years. And it came about because I was just a regular birder until one day, 15 years ago, actually, I think, I was asked by the BBC, contacted out of the blue, to appear in Springwash talking about my local patch in West London, Wormwood Scrubs. And I thought, yeah, sure. And I remember making the recording, but before the actual day we filmed, I remember meeting the crew, and the director asked if I wanted to have a screen test, if it was okay to have a screen test. And inwardly, I was thinking, me? Why? Me? But outwardly, I said, yeah, of course, no problem. So I went home, and I remember pacing up and down the kitchen thinking, what can I say? What can I do that can make me stand out? I want to be the next David Attenborough. I want to be clambering over rocks in the Galapagos and, plowing my way through, not plowing, but going through jungles in Peru. But I thought that's not going to happen. And I was trying to think of a way to stand out. And then I thought of Jamie Oliver, who at the time was called the Naked Chef. And I was thinking, no one in my world has a moniker like that. So what if I call myself something? That means I'll stand out more. I'll get more TV work. So I was thinking, well, I like urban birds and stuff. Maybe the city birder? What about the urban birder? That sounds all right. So the following day, I introduced myself as the urban birder, did the recording, and they played it out using the urban birder thing and title, and I suppose the rest is history after a while, because basically I did it initially to thinking that I'd get more work. But when I realized that the window of opportunity is so slender, it's untrue, I also realized that because everyone seemed to love the idea of the urban birder as a brand, and they thought it said what it did in the tin, I kind of realized that there was a job to do. And I realized that no one was really talking about conservation in urban areas in the way that I wanted to, or I imagined I could do. So it kind of started from there.
That's really, really interesting. Yeah, very much so, David.
It's interesting, David, and the book you picked up, that was my first introduction to birds, if you like, outside the garden. I had a very similar experience to you. I picked up that book and I actually bought it, and I couldn't believe the amount of birds that you could find across Europe. It just completely blew my mind.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's just totally, and the problem is, not the problem, but the good thing is in a way is that for me, well, actually it is a problem, because now the field guides of today, they start off with ducks and geese and end up with whatever, buntings, I think.
Yeah.
And I can't get it in my head. For me, it should be divers, grebes, and ends up with crows. That's what it does. That's what should happen.
Yeah.
So I refuse to acknowledge that. I refuse to believe that parrots are related to kestrels. I can't believe that. I'm sorry. I can't believe that skewers are related to auks. I'm not having it.
Okay. We accept that. We accept that. It's crazy. You're the first person we spoke to, David. I'm sure he looks kind of cool down there in the bottom corner, but I think you've ruffled some feathers. Forgive the pun. You're birding from a younger age than McCluskey, so you are. That's quite a bit younger. So yeah. So you've beat him on that one. Your Puma story is fantastic, by the way. I haven't had Reincarnation has not featured in a How I Got Into Birding speech before, so we're delighted to have that one. So who's asking the next question?
Yeah, so David, what's your favorite bird and what's your favorite UK bird?
Okay, well they're one and the same. Ring-ouzel. And the reason why the ring-ouzel is my favorite is, again, back to this book. Because when I was a kid and I was looking through each page and I was just salivating, thinking, well, these birds look amazing. When will I ever get to see one of any of these things? But then I turned to the plate with the ring-ouzel and blackbird on it, and I saw the ring-ouzel and I thought, wow, it looks so familiar. And I read it and I realized that despite the fact it looks similar to a blackbird, it was very different in terms of its character, different in terms of its choice of habitat. And I later found out that there were, compared to the 8 or 9 million pairs of blackbird, there's only like 7,000 and decreasing pairs of ring-ouzel, and it was a summer visitor and all that sort of stuff. And I just thought, who's going to take me to the Cairngorms? Who's going to take me to Dartmoor? You know, because at the time I was told all the time that nature and birds and what have you is only to be found in the countryside. And that's when I kind of started looking around me, and I inadvertently became an urban birder, not realizing. But I just thought I needed to go and see one. And, you know, years and years went past. I think I saw one. I went to Corfu, actually, in Greece, and I saw one there for a split second. And then I twitched one on Scillies in the 80s. But it didn't feel good, you know. And then basically, to cut another long story short, about 16 or 17 years ago, I remember it was April and I was asleep and I had this dream. And I dreamt that I saw a ring ouzel on my local patch, Wormwood Scrubs in West London. And I woke up thinking, that's ridiculous. I mean, I've never seen one in London. There hasn't been any reported in London. Anyway, I went to the Scrubs that morning and I walked around and there were a few kind of classic migrants in, like white throat and stuff like that. And I was going back to the car and I remember getting to the car and I just, for some reason, I don't know what possessed me. I looked over my shoulder just for one last look. And as I did, something dark flew across my head and landed about 50 feet away. Got my bins on it and there, filling the whole screen, the whole view was a male ring ouzel.
Wow.
My favorite bird has come to see me. Every year since then, it comes, or a bird or few birds come through on passage to the Scrubs. I mean, the bigger thing is the fact that, you know, if you watch a local patch, not necessarily some place that everyone else has been to, but if you find your own place, you'd be surprised as to what comes through. And I discovered that ring ouzels use my patch historically, but were unnoticed because no one was birding there. So yeah, that's my connection. It's a spiritual thing, and it's a world bird as well as a British bird. And there's one other species though, Brian, which is my kind of fantasy bird, the bird that I would die happily after seeing, and that is if I rediscover the Eskimo curlew, which I have plans to.
Yeah,
I have plans, Brian.
Yeah. The Eskimo curlew, that would be nice to rediscover, because that was probably a vagrant to, well, it was a vagrant to Britain and Ireland. So it's one that we could have potentially found, even in our patches, you know. So if you relocate them, you let me know for sure.
Listen, I'll be ringing you up first, but I reckon I'll be in Canada though, to be honest.
All right, yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So if you can make it over there, then we're on.
Yeah.
Grand, yeah.
And actually, just one question about the ring ouzel: have you ever seen them on their breeding grounds?
Yes, I have. I've seen them in the Cairngorms every year because I lead tours every spring, sort of like early summer. So I see them every year. So I've seen them there, and I've seen them in a few other places, including in Europe as well. I mean, I went to Slovenia. So I did a couple of tours in Slovenia actually, and I found the alpestris race there, which is much whiter on the wing. So I've seen them on the breeding grounds. I've seen them mostly on migration, and I've also seen them wintering as well. So, I mean, a month ago I was in Andalusia, and in a province called Jaén, and I was in this sort of mountain range, and I think there must have been about 200 ring ouzels all flitting around.
Wow.
I could have spent the week there. I was every time I hear of a ring ouzel anywhere, it's like, for me, the first time I've seen it, I need to go and see it. You know, I just love seeing them. There's no end to my excitement about seeing ring ouzels.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an excitement actually that I can kind of relate to, because for a long time ring ouzel were sort of a bogey bird for me, David. I twitched an awful lot of them, but I wasn't successful, and they kind of, obviously you want to see a male, you know, and I was unlucky enough I've only ever seen one, and it was a female, and it was quite a tatty looking one. I'm grateful for it, but the dream is to see a singing male on territory. Hopefully we've got plans too. We hope to maybe make that happen in the next 6 to 9 months. We'll see.
They breed in Ireland, do they not?
Very, very small numbers in really remote locations.
Yeah.
It's probably only a handful of birds. They used to breed in Wicklow, which are now presumably gone from. There's a handful of pairs in Sligo and Donegal, I think, but other than that, maybe a couple in Kerry, but other than that, there's very, very few. Yeah.
I saw my first in Wicklow, and I think it was 1985. I was checking my notebook recently. A pair, I think it was Glen Malore, and they were probably some of the last that bred in Wicklow in the late 80s. But as you say, I think they're kind of restricted to kind of Sligo and Donegal. I'm not sure about Kerry, but I think there's talk that it could be to do with climate change and also to do with overgrazing from sheep, that the habitat's been damaged so much that there's just not enough good habitat in the country to sustain the population.
Quick question, Peter. Have you got one arm with your glasses on? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I had a pair.
Fell
I
off.
called it my lockdown glasses, but now I've got my lockdown headphones, which is, I was thinking about I should be wearing them to complement your glasses.
I was hoping to sit like this and nobody had noticed.
He's a style icon. Yeah.
Peter Dior Phillips, he strikes again. Go well done.
Yeah, I'm next, I think.
Fire away, man. Fire away.
David, what does birding mean to you, and what drives you to do it?
For me, birding is a very spiritual thing. It's not even about ticking lists or anything like that. It's about being out in nature. Because as a kid, I suppose I saw nature as sanctuary, because I grew up in a very kind of racially not very nice time during my childhood till I was in my sort of late teens. It was very much a case of being sort of abused on a daily basis practically. And it was a little bit down for me to be in that sort of scenario, even though I dealt with it and, I felt sorry for people who were doing it. But when I went birding, it was my one escape. And when I met other birders, I've always had nothing but sort of welcoming sort of, comments and sort of help and stuff like that. So I've always saw it as an escape. And what I love about it, especially urban birding, is the fact that you go to places where others haven't been and you find things, and it may just be common stuff, but I never use the word just or even, because they're 2 4-letter words I don't really get into, because everything's great as far as I'm concerned. So it's really nice to go somewhere and just see stuff. I mean, today I was out, I'm in Spain at the moment, in Extremadura, and I went to a rice field. When I say rice field, this place is, you could spend 2 days there, it's massive. And I was basically going field by field, just checking through. My target was jacksnipe. I didn't see it, but you find fields with nothing, you find fields with a load of black-headed gulls, you find another field and there's like 250 dunlin with, one black-tailed godwit, and, it's just really great to see just anything. And I remember watching, there was a farmer ploughing at one of the wet fields, and there's a whole bunch of cattle egrets and little egrets and black-headed gulls. And I saw one black-headed gull, juvenile, right next to me, and it had a frog and it was trying to swallow it. And it was just amazing just to watch that. So for me, I find watching any bird very relaxing. It's good for my soul. And we all know the benefits from when it comes to mental health, but we knew that as birders years ago. I'm glad it's come out now, but we all know, always known that. We've always realized, but to go birding makes you just feel great. So to answer your question, I do it because it makes me feel great. I just love the feeling. I love being out, and just seeing what I can see. It's great.
Excellent.
I'd echo those sentiments. Like, it's when you go birding, you're cut off from the rest of the world. It's a very, 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 very good feeling. With regards to that black-headed gull, I'm fairly sure Brian could have taught it how to get it down in one go. Brian has no problem, no problem with that. We'll move on to the next question, and it's kind of a big one given our audience. Do you consider yourself to be a twitcher? And if so, what was your first twitch?
Okay, I don't consider myself a twitcher anymore. As I've said in my first book, I did twitch a lot when I was young, and younger, should I say. And my first twitch, I can't remember actually. I think it was something in Norfolk probably. I remember my last twitch, I say last, look, if something's turned up and it's nearby, it'd be rude not to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the last twitch I went to, I think the last big twitch was probably the black lark on Anglesey.
Oh, lovely.
And that was back in I think early
2007,
2000s.
I think. Yeah.
When was it?
Oh, I know, was it 2003? Actually, it could have been.
In the late 90s.
Was it?
Well,
there
whenever.
was a black lark in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, that's someone else. I think this one's in Anglesey. This is kind of a big
Was it
one.
the 90s? Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah, probably late 90s. Because when I went twitching, I was falling out of love with it, really, because I remember being on Sillies, standing in a queue or a massive group of about 900 people waiting for Philadelphia Video to pop out. And I was thinking, what am I doing here? Because people are standing around gossiping. No one was looking. It's like everyone's waiting for someone else to point it out. So I went with the late Peter Grant. He and I and a couple of others walked around the corner of the field or wherever we were, and we saw it somewhere else because we worked out that it does a circuit, so why not just use your brain and try and hunt it down as opposed to just standing in the last spot it was seen. And I wrote in my book, twitching felt like a series of really bad one-night stands. You kind of you get really excited about seeing the bird.
900.
You get excited about seeing a bird, and then if you do see, you kind of think, was that it? And then you leave feeling cold and empty. And I think from that moment, really, I kind of started feeling like some of my friends in Iceland, where they've only got a finite amount of birds they can see normally. So they can normally see every bird that Iceland has to offer in a year, maybe 250 species or whatever. And then after that, you become a finder. And I love the idea of finding. I love the idea of instead of going with the crowd, you turn around and go somewhere else. Or if you're in the crowd, you turn around and look in the opposite direction. I think it's really interesting to do that. And the urban birding thing is quite like that, because I remember early doors, I used to, my friends in the autumn used to rush off to the first headland they can come to. And I'd go into London and they'd be saying, what are you doing? You should be going somewhere proper to go birding. I was thinking, no, because, migration occurs across a broad front and I'm interested in finding something on my local patch. And, that idea was born out because I found ring ouzel, I found lots of common migrants like the wheat-ear and redstarts and stuff. But I also found things like Ortal and Bunting, Richard's pipits, 3 Richard's pipits over the years, all in a patch in West London surrounded by concrete and humanity. So it just shows this, for me, it's actually worth more in a way. But don't get me wrong, I'd love the idea of being on islands but even then I'd rather be on an island or a headland that no one else is on. I prefer
to have to pay for yourself. Yeah.
I prefer that idea of taking a gamble. I mean, it may not pay off, but even so, it's just nice to be trying something somewhere new, because I think in the end, you are adding to the ornithological knowledge by, looking at a new place and recording what you see. So I think we all need to be more, or have more of a finding mentality, and we should become to explore more, basically.
Yeah,
we need to look at new places more.
Yeah,
here.
I love the idea that put forward there, that migration doesn't just happen on far-flung headlands. It's everywhere. It can be everywhere and anywhere, and there is always that temptation to just head off to these kind of remote headlands, as I said. But I think
finish off there, John. Yeah.
I think a really good example of kind of the fact that migration takes place over urban areas is Central Park in New York. I think there's a documentary out there called The Central Park Effect. And essentially Central Park is the first bit of green space that thousands of migrants hit along that particular migration route. And having birded there myself, you can see a huge host of species. Whereas I think the Americans are wise to it, but if you floated the idea of birding in an urban park in Ireland, people would laugh at you. They just wouldn't accept it, and it's crazy because we have a few pretty good urban parks as well that are bound to get things like I'm surprised that there isn't yellow-browed warblers turning up more in places like Phoenix Park. You know what I mean? It's just
probably are, yeah.
Yeah, there's just
there's only, God, Sean Garrity's the only regular birder birds in the Phoenix Park. It's 1,700 acres.
One guy.
one guy, and a couple of other people do it occasionally. But so you're talking about a huge area.
Yeah.
And he has turned up a few good birds. So with a few more people helping him, I found turtle dove, I think it was last autumn in the Phoenix Park. So like stuff does turn up, but there's just not enough people to cover it. I mean, as David was talking about urban places in Britain, you've large populations. In Ireland, you have 4 million across the entire island. It's a completely different story.
Yeah. What's interesting is there's two things. Firstly, when I talk about migration going across a broad front, I mean, I remember once there was this massive fall of spotted flycatchers on Portland Bill in Dorset. 11,000, I think I counted, which was like an amazing number. And I thought I'd love to see that. But I thought, hang on, I'm going to wait a couple of days and see what happens on my local patch in London. And when I turned up 2 days later, I had a tiny microcosm of it. I had 11 spotted flycatchers. For me, that was as good as 11,000 because I only normally get one every now and again. So to have 11 in one go was like incredible. And the other thing is, going back to John's point about Central Park, it's great that places like there have been discovered. But the thing is, if I lived in New York, I wouldn't be going to Central Park. I'll be checking out other parks. And there's a woman I know, Heather Wolf, really good friend of mine. She covers a place called Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is a tiny park compared to Central Park, right in the middle of urbanity, next to Brooklyn Bridge. So it's really busy. Yeah, she's clocked up maybe I think 250 species. And I went birding with her there once, and it was rammed with stuff. Despite the fact there's people jogging and women with their prams and stuff, it was really busy. There were still loads of birds there. So don't be fooled thinking that you need to go to the famous hotspots. Sometimes it's great to just find something for yourself.
Yeah.
I think the spring lockdown kind of, when everybody was birding their patches, an awful lot of people turned up scarcer birds, and I know I had a gargany on patch, which in any other year I would not have found, because I would have been probably off bird in County Wexford or something. But instead I was trying to make something happen on my local patch and checking it every day, and eventually something like a gargany. It's not a rarity or anything, but it's
pretty rare.
Lovely
man.
To see.
It was a county first as well. That's a good.
That was a county first.
Yeah, really good find.
But it's not a national rarity, but it just goes to show these things are passing through the whole country.
Yeah,
the whole time. Yeah, that's why I was glad about lockdown. Glad that people started watching their local patches and rediscovering areas. My local patch was discovered by a whole load of people. Unfortunately, some of them not good, like HS2. But anyway, that's another conversation.
Oh no.
I think I have no HS2. I have I have a slight idea what it is. It's like a train line going through. Is that it? No, or what is it?
Yeah.
I should know more about things that are going on, but I don't. I apologize on that, David. A really cool thing I remember, I think I rang Brian during lockdown. I got so excited about a tufted duck. I got so irrationally excited about a tufted duck that turned up on patch. It was great that we're kind of looking in less likely places, or I suppose places that are on our doorstep, but we're also looking at kind of birds that we might have discounted as well, which is pretty cool. But I don't know, that's my listing element of it. Next question, lads, who's up?
So David, what's the rarest bird that you've seen either in the world or in the UK?
Really tough question to answer, because I don't normally think of birds in those terms, because sometimes rarity is something you haven't seen yet, really. But anyway, I thought about that question because I had a feeling that might be asked. Wink, wink. I think probably one of the rarest birds I've seen might be the Sao Paulo ant wren, which I glimpsed for 2 seconds outside Sao Paulo in this massive area of reed bed. And it was only recently split from another species or discovered or what have you. And there's only meant to be maybe 100 at most. So that
David, could you describe it? I'm not going to lie.
I've never heard of it.
It could have shrunk.
Well, I'm not going to lie either. I never heard of it until I actually saw it. I was told what it was. In the UK, again, I suppose the Nauman's thrush. There's only been one, hasn't there?
Yeah.
And also Philadelphia vireo. I think there's been one in Ireland, hasn't there?
There's been
Yeah.
3 in Ireland and 1 in Britain. Yeah.
Wow, 3 in Ireland.
Yeah.
The Nauman Strush was in London, was it?
Yeah, this in Chingford, I think. Yeah, East London. I was
Wow.
I skyped off a meeting to go and twitch it, and whilst I was watching it, a redneck grebe flew over, which I've never seen ever fly over anywhere.
Very cool. Beautiful bird too.
Yeah. Yeah. Norman's thrush is a very good one. Yeah, that's a bit of a blocker.
Red-throated thrush I've seen as well in Essex. Is that
Wow.
Yeah, that's another blocker.
Yeah.
Was there a black-throated thrush there last year or the year before as well in Essex, or is that somewhere else?
Oh no, just black-throated thrush
regular.
is kind of they're kind of annual in Britain.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a few of them there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Peter, I
So,
think it's
yeah,
your
next-
question.
Is it you?
Yeah, I'm next. Yeah. What's the rarest bird you found, David?
That's a really good question. I think the one that jumps out immediately is the Sabines gull I found in southern Chile, in Punta Arenas. I've never seen one before, by the way, and it's one of those birds that I vowed never to twitch. That, along with a snowy owl. I've never seen a snowy owl either. And I found one on the beach, and I remember because I was leading a tour to Antarctica, and I told the ornithologist on board that I found a Sabines gull, and he said, "No, you haven't. You've seen a brown-headed gull." I said, "No," and I showed him pictures, and he had to eat his words. But it turned out that it was the most southerly record for Chile ever, so that was
Wow.
pretty good.
Deadly.
But aside from that, I think the rarest things I've found have been on my local patch. I mean, at Worman Scrubs in West London, I remember finding a common rosefinch, which was I think the 3rd twitchable rosefinch in London for like 15, 20 years. Orton Bunting, I think, was the 13th in London ever. So, one or two bits and pieces like that, and finding hooper swans at Brent Reservoir in London, which were the first since, I think, the 60s. I found it in the 90s.
Wow.
Maybe. So, yeah, it's stuff like that. I mean, we all dream of seeing and finding things. I mean, I was on the Azores, and we kind of briefly saw a grey catbird, and I think that would have been the first record of one in Azores, I think. And then in Iceland, I remember being with my guide and hearing this strange warbler singing from one of the few blocks of forest anywhere on the island. And at first I thought it was a wood warbler because it sounded a bit like that. And I thought, hang on, that sounds weird. And then we saw it fly and it was dark. And I suddenly realized it was an Arctic warbler. And we played the call back and it was exactly the same. And I think that was the 6th for Iceland.
Very cool.
Well,
And also being on the Faroe Islands and finding the Faroe Islands, or co-finding the Faroe Islands' 2nd ever Bonaparte skull, and first ever white-winged scoter as well. So yeah, 1 or 2.
White-winged scoter. Did you find one of those?
Yeah.
Class. That's not the one only a couple of years ago, was it? Maybe 5 or 6 years on like a little pond, was it?
Not in the pond. It was actually in the harbour. And when we saw it, I was with my good mate Silas Olofsson. When we saw it, we thought it was a velvet scoter. It's only when he
was
went
that the female type, or was it a male?
I think it was a young male.
Okay, right.
I think it was a young male. So yeah, I mean, I dream like anyone else of finding interesting things. In fact, one of my things would be to find something interesting in Extremadura. I've just recently applied to go on the landfill site near the city, and I normally watch from outside the perimeter fence. I've been in once and I found a common gull, which is actually a rarity in Extremadura. But my goal is to find the region's first ever Caspian gull. So that's my goal.
You're in a short list of people there applying for entry into that particular place, I'd assume. So just out of curiosity, I covered that one. What do you consider to be your best birding or wildlife moment, David? It could be 2 separate things.
Yeah, well, I can't give you that because there's so many. And I can give you 2 now, and they'll be different 20 minutes later. I think one was when I first saw my first ever wryneck. I was on Blakeney Point, and we knew that there was a wryneck at Halfway House, but it's a trudge on the shingle for like 4 miles. It's whatever it is. It's like a murderous walk. And I was with my mate, and we were walking, and then we stopped to do some sea watching. And I remember seeing a few, sooty shearwaters and things. And then I carried on walking, and I suddenly realized I'd left my beloved book, the one I took from the library, on the shore, on the beach. I went back, and I remember stooping down to pick it up. And as I looked up, I was eyeball to eyeball with a dotterel, and that was a lifer.
No way.
It was just standing there looking at me. I was thinking,
Deadly.
Jesus. So anyway, we got to the spot where the wryneck was supposed to be, and I remember setting my scope up, and there was like a bush down the slope, and we're looking at this bush for half an hour, maybe saw a couple of flies, and that was about it, nothing in it. So I said, you know what, I said to my mate, we might as well go. So I got up to leave, and my knee hit my scope and changed the angle. For some reason, I just decided to look through, and as I looked through, there, filling the whole view was a wryneck. So that was quite a special moment. And by the way, that mate of mine is Irish guy. He's from Kerry. He's my birding buddy that I converted to be a birder when he was 11. I kind of press ganged him into it, and now he's really into it.
Does he bird in Ireland, or?
Huh?
What's his name? Or
Would we know him?
Yeah.
No, he lives in London now. He's not.
Okay.
You wouldn't know.
Okay.
So that's one amazing time. I mean, there's so many. I mean, when I found, I guess when I found the Ortolan Bunting as another one, walking along in the scrubs, my local patch, and seeing this finch fly up, or what I thought was a finch, land on the fence, and I thought it looked a bit odd. And I looked at it, and it had the eye ring and the moustachial stripe. And I was thinking, because if I'd been in Spain or anyone else, I would have just got it immediately. But because I was so flummoxed, thinking, what is that? Is that an escaped cage bird? And then suddenly it hits me. It's an Ortolan Bunting. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was in shock. In those days, I didn't have a camera or anything, so I couldn't take a picture of it or anything. And it stuck around for a little bit and flew off, and that was it. So that was good. But then ask me that question in 10 minutes, I'll give you 2 different birds.
Yeah. So, David, do you keep a list of anything, like we said, like a British list, a world list, lockdown list, anything like that?
It's interesting because I often say that I don't list, but actually I do. So I've got a world list. I'm actually currently keeping a list in Extremadura because there's this, I suppose, competition to see who can see the most in a year. I'm currently 9th in the league, which I'm surprised by, really, because I'm hardly ever here. But then, having said that, I've been here practically all this year. I keep a Spanish list as well. British list I don't really keep anymore. I kept a British list until I saw about 400 species, and that was when I was kind of twitching, and I kind of stopped after that. And I sometimes keep a list, like I keep a scrubs list, but even then that's not totally up to date. I tend to just list all the birds I see on a daily basis, or whenever I go out, I do it that way. So yeah, those are the lists I keep really. I'm not hell bent on them.
Yeah.
But yeah, my world list actually is not as much as as you would expect for someone who travels as much as I do. And the reason for that is the fact that I'm not really interested in tick, 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 tick. I'd rather spend time and see something. So for example, if I'm in Latin America or South America and the guides are so keen to show you this and play this to you and play, and I say, you know what? Stop your playback. If we see something, that's fine. If we don't see it, that's fine as well. And you end up seeing a lot less, but at least you remember what you've seen. So that's my.
What is your world list out of interest?
My world list is about 2,600.
Really good.
That's impressive. That's so good.
Yeah, but I mean, there's people I know who travel as much or more than I do, and they're in their 4,000 or 5,000s. But it doesn't interest me. I mean, I'm not really that fussed on ticking sounds I hear in the back end of a jungle somewhere. I'd rather see something and know I've seen it, so I can recall it.
Quality over quantity. Dave, at the risk of sounding like a complete noob here, what's a scrubs list?
Wormwood scrubs is the name of my patch, and the affectionate name for it is the scrubs.
Perfect.
So I've been keeping a list I've been going there since the early 90s, and the list now currently stands at 150 odd. If you can imagine, it's a park which half of it is basically playing fields, The other half, there's an area of grassland and there's some small patches of wood, but I mean, nothing major. And it's completely traversed by people the whole time. Yet, even though there's no standing water, we've got a really impressive wader list. You know, whimbrel, curlew, little ring plover, green sandpiper, jack snipe, snipe, woodcock, and then birds of prey like osprey, goshawk, hen harrier, marsh harrier. You know, it's just incredible. The quail, red quail, great grey shrike, redback shrike, you know, Orson bunting, little bunting as well. I mean, it's just incredible, the sort of stuff, wryneck that's turned up there. And this park is not special, which proves to me it's a brilliant actual advertisement for going somewhere, anywhere, and just watching it. Because, you know, it doesn't matter where you are, things will turn up, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a great advertisement for that.
Yeah.
Peter.
Extremadura is your favorite place to bird. What makes it so special?
Well, actually, Wormwood Scrubs is my very favorite place to bird. Extremadura is my second favorite, and it's very close, I must say. And the reason why it's so special, the area, just for those who don't know, it's a region in Spain, which is the 5th largest region in Spain. So it's twice the size of Wales, or the size of Switzerland, or just under the size of Kentucky in the US. This is for your worldwide following, watching on YouTube.
Tim, USA, take note of that.
And it borders Portugal, and it's in between Madrid and Seville. So it's inland, totally inland. And despite what people may think about it in terms of they think it's an arid area, in fact, it's lots of different habitats ranging from forested mountains through to sort of savannas in a way, I suppose, man-made grasslands really, but huge grasslands and slightly wooded areas, which they call dehisces, as well as urban areas. And what I love about it is that despite the fact it's one of the sort of #1 places for birders to go around, especially around Europe, to go there to tick off things like great bustard and black bellied sandgrass and pintail sandgrass and calandra lark and stuff like that, they all seem to go to the same 5 or 6 places. So there's Monfragüe Nature Reserve, National Park, shall I say, which is where the vultures and eagles are. Well, they're actually everywhere, but that's where people think they are. And then they go to a place called Trujillo, where there's plains where you can see the bustards and sandgrass. So they just go to the same places. And what I love about Extremadura is the fact that it's split into 2 provinces. And I'm in the Badajoz province, which is in the south. And Badajoz is barely visited, barely, by birders. I mean, there's obviously a few birders that live there, but that's about it. And there is so much to discover. I love, even in the city, I love going to areas. I mean, I have a little patch within the city, and in 1 year and visiting it maybe 10 or 11 times, I clocked up 120 different species, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's just an area which is so ripe for discoveries because people don't go there looking for anything else. They just go looking for the chosen species because they've got their minds totally set on whatever, and they don't see anything else. Whereas for me, I open my mind and I see everything else. I'm interested in possibilities because that's how I think a birder should be. A birder should have an open mind. If you go somewhere and someone gives you a list of what birds could be seen there, you look at it, you say, that's great. And then when they walk away, you scrunch it up, throw over your shoulder, do a nice little Cruyff back heel into the bin, and then you keep walking and you look for everything and anything, you know, and that's how you find things, by opening your mind to whatever could turn up. So Extremadura to me is a massive, massive area that full of potential basically. So I love, you know, when I got time, just getting out and exploring, you know, getting in the car and driving in a direction and just finding a reservoir or a block of woodland maybe, and just walking around and see what you can find. It's great.
How easy are little busters to see in Extremadura?
Very, very difficult now. When I first, I mean, I've been going to Extremadura now for 10 years. And when I first showed up, they were a lot easier to see. I mean, also in neighboring Portugal as well, in the Alentejo region. I mean, I remember going to Alentejo actually and coming across, actually Lisbon. I was in the Tagus Estuary. In their sort of natural part there. And I remember walking past a field and there were 70 in this field, all inching their way away from me, looking cautiously at me.
Deadly.
In Extremadura, they're becoming harder and harder to see. I mean, I lead tours in Extremadura, and you really sometimes have to work to find them now. There's been a real terrible decline in numbers. Similarly, with Montague's Harrier as well.
Yeah.
Gone through the floor. I mean, I remember years when you'd see 15, 20 easily, during the course of the summer. This summer, I know we were in lockdown, but I saw maybe 5 the whole summer, so there's a real problem. The reason for the Montagues is Montague's Harriers decline not only in Extremadura, but in most of Spain. It's the changing farming practices, the fact that I think global climate change has caused the farmers to harvest earlier, and there's not enough people like us on the ground to tell the farmers, hang on, keep that area free because there's, Montague's Harriers breeding. They don't know. They're mowing these areas down. It's not their fault. They don't know. So, but with the little bastard, it's different. I think because people are trying to put their finger on why they've declined. I mean, part of it could be changing land use, but also there's an inexplicable reason as well.
Yeah.
The great bustard is still, relatively easier. Well, it's easier to find. There's more of them, but for some reason, little bustard is really difficult now.
Yeah, because I've often seen kind of videos of the little bustards displaying in Extremadura with just like the kind of puff of white when they're displaying males. I'd love to see it sometime. Just kind of jumping around the field, pretty much.
Yeah, I've only seen it a few times actually, and when I did see it, I took it for granted, thinking I'd be seeing them every year. So
yeah,
it shows you.
You mentioned there about when you're birding in Extremadura, your urban patch. And I just want to ask, do you think there's much of a difference between urban birding in, say, the UK and Ireland and that of Spain and Extremadura? Are there any cultural differences, or is it more accessible, or is it?
Well, on one level, there's no difference no matter where you are, because cities tend to have the same kind of blueprint, i.e. there might be a river running through the middle of it, there's going to be cemeteries and reservoirs and all that sort of stuff. So excuse me, on that front, it's very similar wherever you are. The difference is, I think, in terms of attitudes and culturally, Europe to me is way behind the UK. So, for example, I could walk through London or Bristol or even Dublin, I suppose, and not many people would look at me if I was wearing my binoculars. Whereas in Europe, it's like, you got something hanging out your trousers or something. It's just incredible how people can't, they just don't get it. Yeah. I remember being in Israel. I was in Eilat, and I was in this park which was frequented by drunks. And it's mostly concrete, this park as well. Actually, they had a lawn and a few trees, but this park is amazing for migrants. And 2 guys walked past. What are you doing? Oh, I'm watching birds. What do you mean watching birds? You need to go to the bird watching centre outside the town. That's where you need to be. So they just don't get it. I think it's interesting. That's part of the reason why I do what I do, because I'm trying to get people to understand that, nature is everywhere. And, things like migration is happening across a broad front, which means that you don't have to leave your house to see swallows migrating over, or, have warblers come if you've got a garden and it's got bushes and stuff, to have warblers come through. You need to, people need to be re-educated in terms of where things are. And I always say to people that they need to look at urban areas as if you are a bird. What would you need? You need a bush to feed in. Well, there's the bush there. It doesn't matter if it's on a roundabout or in the middle of, Cape Clear. It doesn't matter. It's the same place, and it has food. So, and shelter as well. So it's trying to educate people, and even birders as well. I mean, when I started the urban birder thing, I had a lot of resistance, and people, saying, what are you talking about? But now people get it. I mean, I still have pockets of resistance. I mean, there's a couple of organisations that were approached for me to talk to them, and they turned around and said, well, actually, we're in a country where we don't really value urban birding. It's just not real birding, is it? So, you get people like that still. But for me, I'm not there for them. I'm there for people who are thinking about it. I'm a bridge that will try and introduce people to the world of birding and conservation per se. And once they cross that bridge, they can then do what they need to do. You know what I mean? Or get involved in whatever they want to get involved in. I just want to show people that there is such an abundance of stuff around, just walking out their front door, you can just look up and see stuff.
Yeah. So if we were to visit Extremadura, what time of year would you recommend? Would it be spring?
Spring is a time when most people show up. And even then, spring is probably sort of March, April through to no later than the late sort of mid-June, because it starts getting hot. But during that period of time, you get a lot of the birds passing through that come to either to breed or migrate through. So you got the bulk of the species there. During the summer, it's hellish sometimes. I mean, the temperature gets up to 44 degrees. The hottest part of the day is at 7 o'clock in the afternoon. So I remember when I first turned up, part of the reason why I'm in Extremadura was that I used to have a girlfriend, and she was a birder too. And I remember I was with her, and it's during the summer. It was my first summer, and I said, "Right, let's go birding." She said, "It's 4 in the afternoon. It's 45 degrees outside." I don't care. I'm going birding. So I went outside, and I lasted maybe 20 minutes. So I said, "Yeah, okay, I understand. Okay, you're right." It was just too much. It just gets too much. Winter, i.e. now, I think it's a great time as well, because there's no one around birding. In fact, you don't see birders around even during spring, apart from the occasional tour going around. So I spent the whole day today, out birding. I never saw one birder. That's usual. You got the whole place to yourself. You can go wherever you want. And you just, it's just great to watch things, to just spend time on your own, or if you've got friends, what have you, and just, just enjoy this amazing landscape. Go to mountains, but no one there, apart from maybe a few people walking or cycling. No one else there doing anything like what you're doing. And it's quite liberating, really.
And what kind of species would we be seeing that you wouldn't usually see when we say Britain and Ireland?
You'll be seeing a lot of species. For example, during the spring and summer, you'll be seeing things like rufous-tailed bush robin. There's a few pockets where they nest. Obviously, the bustards and the sand grouse. Larks, you'll be seeing calandria larks, which are obviously very rare vagrants in Britain and Ireland. Short-toed lark, Thekla's lark, of course. Crested lark. And then... What
about things like roller and...
Roller.
Bee-eater.
You'll be seeing loads of things like fantail warblers, Zitian cesticula, Sardinian warbler, Western Orphean warbler, Western Benelli's warbler, Western subalpine warblers.
What about black vulture?
Starling. Sorry?
Black vulture.
Yeah, black vulture is interesting. In Extremadura, but the distribution of the black vulture is disparate, really, but it starts in Iberia and spreads over towards Mongolia, but it's very disparate. And the population in Extremadura is the largest in the world. And there's about 900 pairs. So you can see them even flying over Merida, the city I'm in now. You see them. You can't come to Extremadura and not see a black vulture.
Class, yeah.
Griffin vultures, okay, again, are very common. I suppose there's nearly 4,000 pairs nesting. So you see them every day, along with black vultures. And there's smaller numbers of, very small numbers actually, of Egyptian vultures. But what's great about Extremadura is that there's 23 different breeding pairs of species, should I say, of raptor.
Class, yeah.
So, it's very rare you look up and not see a bird of prey. I mean, today, I wasn't even looking, I was more about waders, but I was looking up and I saw red kite, black vulture, griffin vulture, golden eagle. I had a really close golden eagle fly over me. And it's amazing seeing golden eagles in areas that you wouldn't expect. I mean, I always think of golden eagles in Scotland, in the mountains.
Yeah.
But this was in a lowland area flying over a rice field. It's incredible. Marsh harrier, hen harrier, kestrel, and this is just a normal kind of winter's day. So it's just incredible, the sort of stuff you can see. I mean, what I love about it is like there's so many different species. Sometimes only one or two pairs, maybe one or two you might see. You might be in one particular area. You might see, 10 goldfinches, 15 linnet, 30 corn buntings, one subalpine warbler, but it's such a variety of things, hoopus, and, it's just incredible. So I love the variety.
I presume you get both storks as well.
Yeah, in fact, I saw both today, actually. A white stork is practically resident. I mean, there's obviously a big influx during the spring and summer.
Yeah.
But I had 4 black storks today in a reservoir where I visited,
Lovely.
which is quite a surprise, really, because they are essentially summer visiting. So, and I think 2 weeks ago I found a squacco heron as well, which is
Class.
summer visitor. So,
Yeah.
and that was in the city in a river. So, you know, it's just a lot of things to be seen.
You
Quite
probably get
exciting
good
place.
number of cranes at this time of year as well.
Amazing cranes. I mean, I think Extremadura has the largest population in Europe for wintering cranes, and I think, if I'm not wrong, about 170,000 individuals.
Wow.
And today I was in the rice fields, and it's just amazing to hear them all calling and in the fields feeding. The interesting thing about Extremadura, actually, just to finish up on it, is the fact that a lot of the birds are quite unapproachable. Even black-headed gulls and stuff like that, they are very nervous. There is hunting that goes on in Spain, theoretically hunting rabbits and red-legged partridge, but this time of year they also shoot song thrushes.
Okay.
In fact, I don't know if you saw the other day that an eyebrow thrush was shot.
Saw that. Yeah.
Which is like, I mean, any bird.
You could see all the other dead thrushes in the picture, like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mental. Yeah.
Is that for sport, David, or is it for food? Is it
in theory they eat them? I don't know, but a lot of the birds are very skittish. You know, you can't really get close to a lot of them, which I've noticed actually. They're much more approachable in Ireland and Britain than they are in Spain.
Okay. Peter.
Yeah, I think actually we asked this question. It's where did the name urban bird come from? So I think you covered that. So John, you're up next.
So I think you may have covered this before, David, but urban areas are typically not favoured by birders. What makes them special to you?
For that reason, that I'm not favoured by birders. I love the idea of exploring. I love the idea of going against the grain. I love the idea of being told you're mad going there. I love the idea of me ringing them up and saying, actually, I've just found this. You know, I remember when I went to Wormwood Scrubs for the first time, and for the first 10 years I was on my own, and I used to report, you know, numbers of things like, for example, 150 meadow pipits in the winter or June autumn, and report X amount of wheat ears every year. And one year we had 22 wind chats in an area which was maybe no more than 14 acres. And it was the biggest gathering of wind chats that autumn in the whole of southern England on my patch. And
Great.
I think people didn't believe that at first. People used to think I was adding zeros on, stuff like that, until they showed up and then they saw, you know. So I love that idea. I like the idea. And I love people that sort of do that. I mean, I've got a few friends around the world who I really respect in terms of their birding. I mean, one guy I mentioned earlier, Silas Olafsson, who's in the Faroe Islands. On the Faroe Islands, I think the population is 50,000 people, if that, of which I think there's probably about 5 or 6 regular birders. And you have to be a finder. And what he does, I mean, I went out to Faroes one autumn, and it was the hardest birding I've ever done in my life. In fact, if I was a beginner, I wouldn't even advise it, because it's make or break. It will break you. You know, this is the SAS training as far as I'm concerned, because we're walking down a town, it's High Street, main road, and these towns are basically one-horse towns. And in the Faroes, you're allowed to go in people's gardens and walk around, which I found difficult to get into my head, being English and stuff. I remember standing outside someone's hedge looking into their garden, and then this big geezer comes out, big bloke, I think his name was Thor or something. What are you doing? I said, I'm just watching some birds. Come in the garden. When you finish, come in for a cup of tea.
It's a pity they're not like that on Mizzen Head.
And basically, you could search 200 bushes and find one chiff-chaff. You know, it's soul destroying. However, the thing that kept you going was that you knew that the next bird could be amazing.
Yeah.
And that's when we found, the Bonaparte skull. Obviously not in the bush, but I mean, we found various things. So he does that every year. And I love when he puts up his Facebook situations and shows the birds he's found. It's just incredible. And he went to Mongolia because his wife worked in Mongolia for a while. And he's finding first for Mongolia every week practically, because that guy looks at everything. And that's what I love about, birders. I love birders that look at everything twice. Even if you think you know what it is, look at it anyway. You might see something that this bird's doing, like a greenfinch doing something that you've never seen before. Take an interest in everything. Don't be blasé. And plus, when you look at everything, you learn about common birds so that when you actually see something that isn't common, you see it straight away. It hits you straight away. So I love that kind of ethos. I love the ethos of being a finder as opposed to just someone that follows or waits for someone to ring them to tell them what's around.
Yeah, it's funny. The first time I ever got kind of like a proper buzz out of seeing a bird was I think I was probably 7 or 8. I was after coming out of primary school and in the middle of quite a busy town, and there was a small flock of waxwings on the trees right outside my school. And it was just unbelievable because I'd be looking at the pictures in the book or whatever. And I remember ringing Dad, and Dad came up and saw them. And then he rang a lad who had an interest in birds in Carrickmacross, and he came and saw them. And the next day they were gone. But like, that was the first kind of scarce bird that I've ever seen. And that was in the middle of quite a busy town. So like, these birds can turn up anywhere,
Well, when you think about the British list, for example, I mean, I can't speak for Ireland, but in Britain, there's been 620 different species on the list, of which 95% have occurred in urban areas.
Really?
Wow.
An interesting statistic. All right, I never would have considered that.
So that just shows you how important, how good urban, and plus in urban areas, the birds are often much more approachable because they're used to people, and also because the habitat's so fragmented. Sometimes you can get a lot closer and you get more of them. I remember on my patch in Wormwood Scrubs in the spring and autumn, I used to get large numbers of chiff-chaffs and lesser whitethroats and stuff, much more than my friends in Norfolk, because there, the birds just dissipate into the open countryside, whereas in a city, they're confined to the habitat they can find.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Excellent.
Yeah, so how would you encourage people living in urban areas to get into birding? Or even just get into like the natural world, like even.
I think it's. I always say that because I think one of the barriers is the fact that it's the way that observing nature or being interested in nature is portrayed, especially by the media. It's portrayed as if you need to have a great knowledge. It's portrayed as something you do in the countryside. So automatically, those two things are blockers. In that respect. So I try and tell people not to worry about identifying, just to experience, just to open your mind and get onto the wavelength. And that's a great start because that's how I started. I didn't know what I was looking at. And I think a lot of people are put off by thinking they need to know something. So I think I like to try and make it very easy for people to get involved. And I think also, especially during lockdown, it's quite obvious people getting joy out of seeing things that you and I might find very mundane, or not mundane, but normal.
Yeah.
But they were just like to have a robin come to their garden during the summer, a bird that they expected to be only in the winter. It's great for them to hear blackbirds singing properly this time, as opposed to not even thinking about it. It's a great thing. So those are the great ways of getting people involved, I think, to show them what's on their doorstep and to give them the backstory to what they're looking at and hearing as well.
Exactly, yeah.
David, is living in a city a disadvantage when trying to encourage young birders?
Again, I don't think it is personally, because I think it's how you approach it. I mean, for me, I approach it in a way that it's all inclusive. You just have to try and engage with people. I mean, I remember one time I was on my patch, Wormwood Scrubs, with another person, and it's during the summer, and I went back to the car, and there was a bunch of local youths actually sitting on the car, and the bloke I was with said, "Oh, should we come back later?" I said, No. So I walked up to them, and we had our binoculars on, and they said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, we're watching birds." Birds? I said, yeah. I said, it's great. I tell you what, I bet none of you could trace and track those swifts flying above our heads using my binoculars. So I gave them my binoculars and each of them tried it. And there was one of them that was really engaged with it. He was like really getting into it. And it's interesting just to see once you actually make it acceptable, you know, that people actually then cotton onto it and get engaged. So I think it's how you approach people, and you should approach people speaking their language and not trying to blind them with science and, you know, making them feel as if I need to know stuff. And in other words, I'm not interested. So I think that's one of the main things to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Excellent.
David, I think you've kind of answered this question, but it's concerned urban birding and lockdown. Over the first lockdown in Ireland, which was the start of this year, we all kind of avidly followed your live streams on Facebook, where you were keeping basically a list of the birds that you saw during lockdown. A lot of times I saw you in the roof of your apartment. What was the best bird that you saw, and what was the bird that was the highlight for you during that period?
Yeah, I think in that period I saw about 49 species from my terrace, and the actual vista, the sky, I could only see like maybe 40% of the sky, because the rest of it was satellite dishes and rooftops, and there wasn't a lick of green anywhere. But I think hearing the stone curlew one night after watching an episode of I forgot what I was watching on Netflix, that was amazing. Being on the rooftop and hearing bee-eaters calling and then seeing them was
class,
fascinating, fantastic. And also having a golden oriole fly over very briefly, that was quite good as well. Seeing a flock of spoonbills really flying high in the sky in V formation was spectacular. Watching migrating, there was a short-toed eagle that spent a couple of days in the area, so seeing that flying quite low over the house was nice. It was just incredible to even just when I say even seeing the griffon vultures and black vultures, which were a daily occurrence, was great, because it made me realize I wasn't in England. I wasn't I was somewhere different, and this was special.
Yeah.
I'm watching the antics of local spotless starlings and serens. I mean, I watched a local spotless starling male sing. I watched him have sex. I watched him, try and woo a couple of females and got one in the end. I watched him with his food, bring it back and forth. It's great to actually personally get to know birds. And also hearing a dawn chorus in the morning. I remember one morning I left my phone out to try and record overnight sounds, and I got up there at 4 a.m. or something, 4:30, 5 o'clock, and the sound was deafening. There's about 15, must have been about 15 blackbirds all singing at the same time, and it was like incredible. So that was one of the moments for me as well.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
Yeah, so David, you're a Cape Clear regular. What made you want to bird there?
Number one, I consider myself an honorary Irishman, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
I've always done. My best mate comes from Sligo.
I speak for everybody. You're in.
My best mate comes from Sligo. My birding mate comes from Kerry. So I've always had an affinity. And plus I grew up with a lot of Irish people. So I always had an affinity. And I've been to Ireland loads of times, and I've always found it an interesting place, underwatched and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But when I read about all the things that went on in Cape Clear and all the amazing mystical birds that I've been seen there, I just thought I need to be there. I need to get there. So I first went there about 12 years ago. And it was nice. I loved it. I mean, I've never seen anything amazing there. I mean, I saw spotted sandpiper once.
Yeah.
But I've never seen anything, the last, was it 2 years ago when the Veery and the Scarlet Tanager were there? I showed up the day they left. But, it's fine.
I dipped that by the Veery by about 20 minutes.
Brian showed up the day they left as well.
Yeah. But I love the people there. I love the welcome, I get. I feel very at home on the Cape. I just love it, and it's one of my. I always say it's one of my favorite islands because I actually love islands. The other one I like a lot actually is Tory Island. I've only been to Tory
Oh, yeah.
Island once, but I found a rose-colored starling on there,
Nice.
Lovely, yeah.
and a robin. Apparently, a robin is rarer than the rose-colored starling. But anyway,
Yeah, it's a migrant, yeah.
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 So yeah, so I've always loved it, and I was gutted I couldn't make it last year because I planned to go spend the weekend there and then go over to Kerry because I've discovered Kerry recently,
Okay.
Dingle and places around that way, and I'm still on the Kerry WhatsApp group as well. So
Oh, you're
Yeah.
lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
David-
I think, yeah, go on, Peter, go on, yeah.
How many times have you been to Ireland, and what are your best memories?
I've been to Ireland many times. I mean, I try and go at least once a year, but I've been many times. Best memories. I think one of my best memories actually was meeting the King of Tory Island.
Patsy Dan.
Getting on the boat, and the boat was like rocking like this. Well, I was loving it, and I was watching Leach's petrels at close hand.
Wow.
And then when I got to the island, I was on my own and stayed in B&B. And I remember waking up next morning, walking out, all excited, and the first bird I saw was a corncrake running away from me into the undergrowth. And then 10 minutes later, I found the rose-coloured starling, so that was nice. So that was a nice experience. I also, I think going to Kerry was really interesting as well because I was lucky to see the red-breasted flycatcher, the first one since 1890 or something.
The second for Kerry, yeah.
Yeah, second.
Yeah.
And also Cape. I mean, I've always had a nice time on Cape anyway. As I say, I've not seen anything amazing. I think one of the best moments was when I can't remember the name of the lake that's near.
Loch Earl.
Sorry?
It's a Loch Earl, Peter.
Yeah,
Okay.
Loch Earl, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, I was near there, but I was in the heather, I suppose. I was sitting by a rock. I was watching a skylark or something, and suddenly a merlin flew in and landed, and it was literally 15 feet away. It didn't know I was there. I just watched it. It was amazing. That was really
Very cool.
I wish I had a camera. I could have taken a picture, but it doesn't matter. It's in here, so that was a good time as well. So yeah, I've always had a nice time in Ireland. I find the people very friendly. I find the actual concept of birding in Ireland very interesting. And yeah, I'll be back.
Excellent.
Now I've got 3 new mates I can hang out with.
Anytime, hit us up anytime you're over. One of those unexplored gems is Monaghan, and we can get you.
Yeah, avoid, yeah.
I can't promise there'll be anything worth looking at, but you're welcome. We're getting to the kind of the last couple of questions, David. So we saved the worst ones for last, if that's all right. They're a little bit more tricky. We just fire away at them. You've been very vocal in the past about the lack of diversity in birding and in conservation in general. What do you feel we can do to promote diversity in birding? And how do we go about sort of opening it up to everyone, in your opinion?
Okay, that's a very good question. And it's one that, I mean, I've been thinking about all my life because obviously as a black bird, I've been birding since I was 5, 6. And as I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of racial prejudice against me when I was a kid till maybe late teens, maybe even beyond that. And I've always wondered why. And I kind of put it down to cultural differences. I put it down to the fact that, well, it's again, I think the main overarching reason is the fact that the way nature is sold. You know, you turn on the TV, it's a white middle-class, middle-aged male who probably lives in the countryside presenting a program about nature, and you kind of think, no matter what color you are, creed or race, whatever, you think to yourself, well, that's not me, and you just switch off. And I think to this day, you know, people like the BBC are still very traditional in how they put out their nature output, and it doesn't really, I mean, for example, during lockdown, I thought this was a great opportunity, which was lost, to, you know, for someone to give someone a camera and say, walk around the streets of Leicester and just film whatever you see, well, you know, natural history wise. put together a film, and it would have been a great film because you would have seen loads of different things. And I know that for a fact because I've done just that. I mean, I went to Malaga with a crew. We spent 3 days and we just filmed wherever we saw. We made this really nice film, and it was amazing to see what kind of things you can see. So, there's no excuse for it. I think it's a great way of engaging people. So I think, that needs to be addressed. The media needs to look at how it sells the whole idea of nature. And then on top of that, at the more grassroots level, of course, the NGOs need to start sort of thinking more about it. I mean, in all my life, I've only been approached to talk or offer advice in the last 3 or 4 years. And that's like horrifying because a lot of decisions were made before by a bunch of people sitting in their office in the countryside, making decisions and not speaking to someone like me. Because for me, I mean, I'm probably the most, if not the most well-known birder of colour, not only in Britain and Ireland, but in Europe as well. And I was surprised that, I wasn't spoken to about stuff. And during lockdown, it's interesting because when the Black Lives Matter stuff kicked off, again, with those terrible, atrocious happenings in America, there was a lot of people, online saying various things. And one thing I've always totally disagreed with is when people point fingers at white people and saying, you're racist, you're racist, you're racist, birders are racist and all this sort of stuff, and that but people are being blocked from being involved in nature because of racism. And I just don't see that. I've never seen that because, as I said earlier, it's all about, for me, it was a sanctuary. And I think it's a very lazy way sometimes of it's not very constructive, put it that way. I think it's, you need to talk to everyone, not just point fingers. I don't think that really proves anything. And during lockdown, there was a lot of vitriol on webs on the internet, and I had to ban a couple of people who were, had the cheek to question my knowledge of being a black person. But what was interesting was the media would, I was getting lots of calls from people to give a comment. And at first I wasn't sure what to say. So I needed to work it out for myself. I didn't agree with the narrative out there. I just thought I needed to work out what I needed to say, how I felt about it. And when I did work it out, I remember being approached by a newspaper and they said, we'd like you to write a piece about, this whole situation. I said, fine. I told them what I thought, which is what I just told you. And they said, well, no, we need an angle. I said, well, that is the angle. I said, if you're looking for the narrative you're hearing out there, you're not going to hear it from me, because I don't think it's a very positive narrative at all, So obviously they didn't use me at all. So I think, there's lots of things to be done. I think, lack of role models is another thing. There's very few, if any, at the moment, which is quite sad, really, because there's some really good people out there now, I think. And I think, I was talking to someone, a young person the other day, a young birder, and she was saying that wouldn't it be great if there was a program about wildlife presented by young people? Why can't that happen? And I thought, yeah, that's true. Why can't that happen? Because it seems to go to 1 or 2 people that do the wildlife job, especially in the BBC, and then that's it. So of course it becomes a very narrow field, So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I think there needs to be a few new people involved. Not only in the decision making, but also involved in terms of actually delivering the news and delivering that information.
Yeah, great points, David. I love the way you finished that up there about needing, I suppose, more diversity in terms of role models. And one of the sayings that was always said to me growing up was that if you can't see it, you can't be it. So it's nice to have more representation in that regard. I'm going to move on to another kind of another kind of more difficult question, a tough question, which is that it's concerning the birding industry, if you will. So as someone who works in the birding industry, how important do you feel that it is for conservation, it being the birding industry? And do you feel that governments in Ireland, the UK and Spain recognise its potential, be that economic, regarding conservation or in terms of its social value? It's a broad question, I do apologise.
All right, so basically asking the birding industry conservation, is it seen as a value to governments and other bodies? Is that roughly what you're saying?
Yeah.
And society, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah.
Say again?
And society. in general?
I think
Thanks, Pete.
I think again, the way that nature has been sold in the past and seems to be continued to be sold has marginalized it to being something which sometimes people refer or think of as just tree hugging or what have you. I mean, you just got to look at the government in Britain referring to people who are against HS2 and talking about them as if, or to say that they are newt lovers. So, it needs to be, the whole thing needs to be sexed up a little bit. And I think that
We're here.
exactly, it needs to be sexed up a bit. It needs some different voices. I think that people sometimes underestimate the value of nature. And I think I'm glad that how good nature is for mental health is coming through now, because that's now a value. And I've seen it with some sort of developers now. They're developing estates and they're building estates with, green and blue involved, not just grey. In other words, lakes and ponds and woods and stuff. So the message is getting through a little bit, but I think overall people just don't get it. They don't understand the value. They don't understand why they should keep this block of woods or what have you, because they just think about profit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people still need to make that connection between the fact that the more you kill off in terms of the biodiversity, the more we're killing ourselves. But the problem is, I think it's an age-old problem, and that is the fact that you got the few with money who have all the power, and the rest of us who have power think we're powerless because we're told we are. And it makes it a lot harder. And I think also we have to be careful how you express that message, because if you just go on about doom and gloom the whole time, people will say, well, what can I do? I'll just carry on doing my stuff. It's no big deal. You need to get people on board. And what I want to try and do is to raise a conservation army to get people galvanized. And they may not ever pick up a pair of binoculars or recognize a red wing flying over, but they'll be the same people that, if called upon, will dip into their pockets or will, stand up and demonstrate. You need people on your side. And I think to do that, you need more voices in higher places. And at the moment, there's a lack of those voices because there's only a few that are allowed to talk. So
yeah,
I think that's the issue.
It's a great answer. I was just thinking about recently read about the case of Madagascar, and I think it's one of the best examples of, I suppose, a tangible impact of the birding industry and conservation. In Madagascar, you're losing vast swathes of forest. Deforestation is a big problem, but areas are kind of being set aside and kept, I suppose, rich in biodiversity, because of the financial impacts of birding tours and stuff like that. Now, it's not widespread, but there are certain cases where it's happening. And it just seems strange to me that it's the case of, like, we can have our cake and eat it too. In some circumstances, we can recognize the social and biological value of the birding industry, but also there's huge economic incentive there too, in terms of tourism and so on and so forth, if it's just recognized and valued appropriately by governments. And I don't see that as being the narrative at present.
I mean, one other example I can give you is Serbia. I mean, I lead tours in Serbia to see the phenomenal numbers of owls that turn up in the winter, long-eared owls. When I first found out about that 11 years ago, whenever it was, I was thinking, why don't we know about this? You can walk into this town called Kikinda and see sometimes at the peak up to 850 owls in the town square looking down at you like you're in a massive Harry Potter set. And I was thinking, why? And my friend, who's now my good friend, but at the time, he said, well, the situation is that we're too busy. With only a few of us. We have to try and A, do the surveys, count all the owls, but B, talk to locals to stop them from killing them, because the locals thought that the owls were birds of doom. But then I started bringing tourists there, and it's kind of all picked up, and the BBC's picked up on it, and now it's ecotourism. It's a big thing in that area. You can buy paraphernalia with owl T-shirts and cups and mugs and all that sort of stuff. And on top of that, the Serbian word for owl is sova, and they renamed November Savember, and the kids dress up as owls for a month in school, and there's education about owls in the schools and stuff. It's brilliant. And the government have made this concrete square with a few trees in it, and a national nature reserve. And if you're caught disturbing the owls, you could be fined up to 10,000 euros. That's brilliant. And that's an urban area. And that's a change, you know?
Yeah.
So we need more stories like that. We need more sort of voices telling people about things like that.
Certainly.
That's really inspirational stuff, David, I have to say now, because it's only these small change. You need to make small changes, I think, and they'll have the big impact eventually. Well, I have the final question for you, and I suppose it's when you're looking to the future, you're looking to young people to hope that they'll make a difference, make a better impact on the environment than we've done. So, what single piece of advice would you give to an aspiring birder? Someone thinking of taking up the hobby.
I think what I'd say is I would want that person to really be themselves, bring their personality to it. Don't become a carbon copy of what's gone before. And that's one thing that's frightened me when I looked at some of the coming people. They've been raised up and taught by what I deem as being very grey and conservative NGOs, and they're basically churning out images of themselves. And I'm saying to people, you know, learn what you need to learn, but become a maverick. You know, we need more mavericks, and there's not many. And I think that, you know, you just need to have your own voice and not be afraid and speak up and, you know, and just be heard. It's important. So I think that's what I'd advise people to do, just to have their personality, be themselves, and get out there and try and make a difference.
Excellent.
Super.
Yeah, really lovely and poignant words there to end on, Dave. Thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed it. I'm sure the lads have really enjoyed it, and we hope you have too.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to hooking up with you guys.
Definitely. Yeah,
definitely.
hit us up anytime.
Dave, we have you're talking about Cape. You've been to Cape. You've been to Tory. We've a new island. We're not going to tell you what it is, but we've a new island lined up next year. Yeah. And if we don't bring you over, we're sure to tell you all about it.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. That'd be good.
We're putting it on the map, so we're planting a flag. Folks, thanks very much for watching as ever. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in week in, week out. And again, David, thank you very, very much. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
David.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.